Hello, this is Gail again, and I just wanted to go over some quick tips and techniques for conducting interviews. And this is going to be a very short, brief lecture. So let's start out with the different types of interviews you can conduct. Of course, they can be formal and informal. So the formal interviews are the ones that you set up maybe with your extreme users and you schedule a block of time. You down with them, you show them prepared questions, and then you have a talk about a specific event or process or feeling that they have. And informal reviews are interviews that you conduct with people. Maybe when you're doing another round of observations, you can just chat with people before and after their activity to kind of get their feedback on what's going on. And these are not necessarily recorded, but they give you just a general impression or maybe a survey of things that are happening. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is who you should interview. So on track 3 of your reading, they talk about extreme users, and that's actually a really good audience to target, the people who are passionate for or against the process that they are involved in, and that can be on either end. So those would be very good, that you get a lot of information from that. Or you might also want to interview average users, people who, don't have a real opinion, or if they do, it's not necessarily so dramatic. And the feedback that you'll get from them is if you interview more than a few average users, you can get an aggregate experience to base on. So it's nice to have a baseline for comparison to your extreme users. All right. When you should interview, like I said before, after an informal observation, or you can schedule a time. Okay, another big thing to think about is interviewing for empathy, and I'm pulling this information directly off of track 5 of your reading. And basically, the big question you want to ask is why? Why do people do the things that they do, or why do they feel the way they do? So this why is an open-ended question. So it's a really good thing to start with. Or you can start with tell me about. Tell me about is a good prompt because it triggers your interviewer to maybe consider giving you a story, and that's always beneficial. If you can get people to talk about things in story form, it's very, very useful. Another key thing that you should consider is to don't interrupt when people are speaking. Let them finish their sentences completely before you move on to the next question. And if you're anything like me, this can be very difficult because sometimes this is a bad habit. As people are talking, I'm already considering the next thing that I want to say, or I'm finishing their sentences in my head. You cannot do that when you're interviewing your users because you will not actually be really listening to the words that they're saying. So focus on what they are talking about, listen to them completely, and then when they stop, start with the next question. Which leads us to questions. I'm going to ask you to upload a set of questions before you go out and interview for your formal interviews. And these questions, I think, should be based on your initial observations that you did in the last activity. Should be based on the scenario that you saw. I'm sure that you had some questions that you came up with after you observed people in the process, so that's a really good thing to have prepared beforehand. And for the formal interviews, you really should have these questions before so that you'll have a starting off point to talk to your interviewee. Now, it may be that they just launch off into a story and you don't use your questions, and that's fine unless you want specific answers to things. If, in this instance, if an interviewee takes over and just starts to talk, the best thing for you in that case is just to really listen because you'll get a lot of good information. Finally, when you conduct the interviews in the reading, it really encourages you to conduct the interviews in pairs so that one person can be asking the questions and another person can be doing the listening. If you have the ability to interview in pairs with somebody in your life, that's great. If not, another good option is to record the session. If you have a cell phone, you could download an app that records, and that could be very useful, or you could buy just a mini recorder, and that could be very useful. And that would be something to help trigger your memory so you don't have to worry about writing down every word that somebody says, but you can really listen for the highlights and then go back when you're reviewing your notes to be sure that you've got everything covered. And with that, that's all I have. As always, have fun exploring and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye-bye.